Hi everybody, my name is Sam Pedro and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the book String Theory by David Foster Wallace. So I just watched the movie King Richard, which is about Richard Williams, who is the father of Serena and Venus Williams, the tennis superstars. And the movie was amazing. I really actually enjoyed it. I thought Will Smith did a great job portraying King Richard, and I didn't know a lot about the background of Venus and Serena, their upbringing, and just how methodical their father was about them becoming these great superstars. But anyways, the movie made me think about the book String Theory, which is about tennis as well, because that was a very important book for me. Introduced me to David Foster Wallace and kind of just the essay format in general, which I've really come to like. So I just want to talk a little bit about this great book, String Theory, share a little thoughts about it, and that will be today's video. So I first heard about String Theory because of billionaire Bill Gates. He does an annual reading list where he puts his 5 favorite books that year, and he had listed String Theory, and it sounded interesting, so I went and purchased it. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into because I'd never really read essays, and I also had never read about tennis. And so one of the first things I want to say is that I'm not even a casual fan of tennis. Like, I've played it a little bit in high school with friends, and I've maybe watched a few games in my lifetime. But other than that, it's just not a sport I really play regularly or watch regularly. But I want to make that point that you don't need to be a huge fan of tennis or even really a casual fan of tennis to enjoy these essays, this book, String Theory. And so as I mentioned, String Theory is a collection of essays by David Foster Wallace. There's 5 essays in here, and it's just taken from various moments of his career where he was writing about tennis. And David Foster Wallace, I had never read him before, but he was a pretty prolific essay writer. And so I've read 2 other books now by him. I read A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, which is a collection of essays, and also Consider the Lobster, which is another collection of these essays that he's writing. And I just fell in love with the style, with his style and the way he writes. And it's a weird combination of entertainment and witticisms and anecdotes, and kind of also makes you feel smart as you read these essays. It's almost like a Malcolm Gladwell, but more entertaining, and really, in my opinion, even better than any Malcolm Gladwell book. And so I just fell in love with this format. He's so good. He sucks you in. And I remember reading about one of his essays, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, which is about his experience going on a cruise line. And he wasn't really somebody who would, naturally just go on a cruise. And so instead, a magazine had reached out to him about going on this cruise line and for him to write a write-up on it. And it was just so good, and I had read that it kind of took America by storm. Everybody was emailing it and faxing this essay back and forth to each other because they were just so captivated. And I don't know of anyone else really writing essays in the last couple of decades who had this kind of prominence. And so David Foster Wallace and his essays is just something, if you haven't read, that you really need to check out. And so all of these essays are about tennis. And so David Foster Wallace, he grew up playing tennis. He was semi-professional. He was really into it in his early teen years. And so he comes to the sport with a lot of experience and a lot of insight because he's been there and he's played tennis his whole life. And it was really cool to read about. One of the essays in particular talks a lot about what it was like growing up playing tennis, kind of what the schedule was like, and how tennis was organized at this time. Another essay which is really popular, I believe it's called Tracy Austin, or How Tracy Austin Broke My Heart. And it's about Tracy Austin, who was this female tennis player who was really, really good, had this great start to her career, and then after a car accident and some other accidents, it kind of derailed her career, and so it never hit the peak that everyone thought it would. But Tracy Austin wrote a memoir, and David Foster Wallace wrote that memoir, and then he wrote this essay, a critical essay about the memoir. And it's really about memoirs, sports memoirs in general. And he gives all these examples of how, Tracy Austin was doing these great things, and it may be a great moment in a game, and he'd watched it live, and just how magical it was to watch someone who was so good at their craft play and just totally dominate a sport like Tracy Austin was doing. But when he went and read this memoir, it was just all fluff. There was no substance. You know, it might have a saying like, "Oh, I played that game really well," or "That was a good shot that I hit." And his argument was that those words were nothing compared to the actual sports performance. And he kind of gets into how ghostwriters are a pretty big part of memoirs, and it's hard to know if you're really reading the person's experience or if you're reading it filtered through a ghostwriter who is trying to get your words polished so you can sell a book and sell 1 million copies. And so he kind of digs into the memoir format and just how hollow some of them are. Really liked that essay. And then there's another essay about him going to a professional tournament. I believe it's the Canadian Open, but he just talks about his experience there. Kind of talks about how tournaments are organized and how tennis itself and the ranking system works. And it's just really interesting and really fascinating. And so I really like this book. Again, if you've never really read essays before, I think this is a great start. It's a pretty short book. And it just introduces you to a world of tennis that I had no idea was there. And David Foster Wallace does a tremendous job at educating you and entertaining you about the world of tennis. And so if you're looking for a book to read, I suggest String Theory by David Foster Wallace. It's just a phenomenal book. Go read his other books of essays because they're so great as well. But thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.